Morning we had a session on with business forum, and also right now we had a session on agriculture and MSMEs. And just to expand more on the SME sector, remember it's the backbone of Kenya's economy. Over 90% of businesses are in that sector. It employs over 80% of people, and we will see how we can contribute this, or rather the MSME can contribute to the economic growth of this country. Remember yesterday we had the first COMESA EU Horticulture Connect, which brought together buyers and horticulture and producers to the European Union to interact with small and medium-sized enterprises. And now I'm joined by the Principal Secretary for MSMEs, that is Susan Mang'eni, to talk about how MSMEs are positioning themselves to take advantage of the COMESA EU Horticulture Connect initiative. CS Mang'eni, if you can share with us some of the decisions that, or rather the conversation that was there yesterday in terms of EU COMESA Connect.
Well, I joined in today, but because I've been part of that conversation of EU and opportunities which are there, you know very well that Kenya signed the EU agreement, EPA agreement, sometime last year, which then gives us access to the EU markets. And where we have opportunities is in our agricultural value chain. So this presents opportunities, especially to MSME sector, to globalize our national value chain in our agricultural space. You know very well our economy is heavily agricultural. However, what we've been trading at the global market has been heavily raw materials. So this doesn't give us much value that we require to create more jobs and generate more value to our economy. In the COMESA region, of which Kenya is part of it, is that agriculture contributes about 40% to our GDP, and of course contributes to most jobs that we have in our economies. Unfortunately, most of those jobs are not secure and are not sustainable. So if you're looking at our infrastructural outlook, where we still have lots of challenges, but at the same time, we want to look at where are we on technology spread. And this is how we are saying there's so much that we can achieve by leveraging on digitization, on digital technology to expand the space and create more opportunities for our young people. And you know, when we talk about Africa and more so MSME, the first question that comes, who is that MSME? MSMEs are young people because the population is very young. More than almost 70% of Africa's population constitutes persons below age of 35. And the average age of an African, especially within the COMESA region, is about 17 years. So we are talking about young people. But we also appreciate the fact that young people are technology savvy. So now we are dealing with the nexus between technology and getting more young people, crowding more young people into agricultural sector. So that's why now the conversation that we've had here, the high-level conversation on how do we transform Africa, how do we increase adaptability into agricultural system, how do we ensure that our farmers, especially smallholder farmers who are MSMEs and who are majority in our economies within the COMESA region, can have access to affordable credit, can have access to improved seeds, and also how do we then also manage the post-harvest losses that most of the time affect. So we're discussing opportunities that are emerging in the digital space right now, and see how do we make agriculture become more attractive to our young people. But again, also there is also a question that we've been handling, the paradox between food security in Africa and as well as the agricultural production potential. So you can see we still are very heavy dependent on imports in terms of basic foods. But at the same time, we're also now seeing as increasing yields. For example, maize, we produce, the yields around the maize production has really increased. But then you want to ask yourself, why is other parts, other corners of COMESA region still going hungry when in one part you are having oversurpluses, sometimes which go to waste? So those are the conversation, and they are now bordering on the policies, maybe the kind of policies that we need to put in place. How do we strengthen the regional frameworks that can address the supply side constraints? How do we make sure that the private sector works closely with the public sector in coming up with interventions that can target to build the capacity and the capability of our smallholder farmers, as well as also ensuring that we correct various market failures in the market that make it difficult for MSME to access affordable credit as well as accessing sustainable market.
What came out also there was Africa is battling with rising food import bill, yet we are seeing a lot of, as you allegedly put it, policy alignment. There's need for also bold partnership. What other digital innovations from where you sit that can be employed to ensure that we reduce the import bill?
I think for me, that's very critical because, again, how do we harmonize all these systems across the COMESA member states? Because in one part of COMESA, in one member state, you find us really advocating and agitating for protectionism. We want to protect our value chain. But on the other part, we're also saying we want to see how do we improve the cross-border trade. How do we take to another level the intra-Africa trade? So it's a question that requires a very high level intervention, engagement, and political goodwill, so that we agree that there's no way one member state or one entity can get it right. And you cannot have sufficiency, you alone. We come into this regional framework and integration so that collectively we can achieve prosperity by meeting the deficit, depending on our partners within other member states to help us meet our deficit. So it's a question, and it requires a bit of harmonization just to make sure that we can trade more with each other, we can depend more, because it is true that paradox is there of imports, which is affecting food insecurity. But when that happens, one corner of COMESA region is experiencing bumper harvest, another corner of COMESA region is zero. So then it's a question, how do we harmonize, how do we regularize? So that's the conversation that tomorrow the COMESA Heads of State Summit will be also tackling.
And now I want to bring in Benjamin Tito, who is the Director, Agriculture and Food Authority, as we look at the centralized data system that the panel session was talking about. Maybe you can share with us, how can data gathering for farmers be incorporated into the agriculture for productivity?
Thank you for your question, and it is important to take note that we've not been able to digitalize our data for the longest time. And up to the year 2022, we only had about 300,000 farmers that were registered. Today, as we speak, we are in excess of 6.7 million farmers that are already registered. And what this means then is it is a little bit easier for the government to be able to plan on government incentives and other things that the government can be able to do, including fertilizer subsidies, seed, and also mapping out areas where different crops can be grown. And all this has been enabled by the digitalization process that has already, this government has taken into keen interest to be able to look at ways in which we can be able to have all value chain players mapped and the respective roles that they do play. So it is quite important to take note of once we have the e-voucher registration system, we've been able now to get full benefits because farmers are known where they are, the crops that they are doing, the acreages that they are doing, and it is now a little bit easier to be able to centrally map farmers and give them support that they need.
Okay, what's the future of African agriculture? Does it lie in traditional methods or in smart technologies?
It is technologies, because when we look at the technological advancements of what is needed, let's even start from the cold chain infrastructure management, use of modern seed, use of drone technologies in doing surveillance and the rest, because today agriculture is becoming digital, and we have to employ these platforms that are able to give resilience and also able to give results that are very accurate. You remember in the olden days when we used to do knapsack sprayers for spraying. Today the same can be achieved through precision agriculture, where we can use drones to be able to militarily point where the pests are in terms of scouting and administer the correct dosage. And what that means then is an advantage in terms of saving cost for the inputs that we are using, and also saving on the requirements for this. Remember, we have to keep our environments clean, and what this means is then we have less wastage of pesticide residues.
Thank you, sir. Time is not on our side, so but I can bring in the lady here. She can share with us her name, and you can share with us